Codemasters were a huge name in video games when I was still years away from my GCSEs. Richard and David Darling are possibly the biggest fairy tale of the bedroom coder, and they boomed out of it and into their own tiny empire, becoming a global publishing and development house for many huge titles from its base located in the home county of Warwickshire. Now cresting the 8-bit wave of home computers that dominated the UK and European gaming scene of the time. They later set up Codemasters, and as the 8-bit era died out, they also had to leave behind the budget brand they had created alongside other giants of the time in Mastertronic. Now, I could create an entire retro episode on the talented siblings and the history of the company in games, and maybe if enough interest is warranted, I may do just that. But for now, we will focus on the titles in question, of which the team have created many over the years, with the Spectrum-rooted Dizzy series, a penchant for simulator titles that covered all manner of real-life sports or hobbies, something that would lead into the huge Colin McRae and later Dirt series of rally titles that graced many disc trays across the world. But a certain title made a big splash on both sides of the pond in 1991 when they saw an opportunity to leap onto the success of Nintendo's first home console that was dominating the US. Forgoing any need to ask permission of the mighty N, and after gaining the license from Galoob to the toy sensation, California Boogie Boys became Micro Machines, thanks to some reverse engineering, deluxe paint, a Commodore Amiga, and of course a Game Genie. It landed in NES carts to stifled sales, thanks in no small part to the legal battle they won in the end with Nintendo. It still managed to cause a stir in more than just the courtrooms. It then gained far more popularity with the various ports that landed across every machine you could purchase at the time. Game Boy, Game Gear, Super Nintendo, Amiga, Mega Drive, MS-DOS and more all had a slice of the Tinker Toy racing antics. Even though some conversions had extra benefits such as sprite rotation scaling or drifted handling, they all shared the same competitive, tight and short racing battles that extended and grew through many sequels over the decades, 3 of them in fact, and far more generations, bringing us up to date with the 7th entry in World Series, now out on PS4, Xbox One and PC, running under the Unity engine. Oh no, is this going to end in a crash? The first thing is, this title returns them to the budget price of old. Well, the equivalent thereof. £20 or $30 is a low price for a modern console game, which is a refreshing change, specifically for a retail disc. But then after you play the game, the corners cut stand out enough to catch your eye, or maybe even take it out. Any hope of a single-player championship should be left at the door. Instead, a simple skirmish mode is all it can muster for those who are Billy No-Mates without the internet. Something of a big loss, with the title alluding to a more grandiose championship affair that courts the best the world has to offer. Now, a saving grace and reference it may be to the online function that is present, enabling 12-man or women racing, the same number as the vehicle count in the game, across the game's 10 tracks. Now, the devious nature of the track design, impregnated with everyday miniature obstacles, is a high point of the series, but it can all feel more like an advertising reel for Nerf, with the branded logos and weapon pickups, which are quite minimal. It captures the spirit of the original game, delivering a good mix of frenzied action, near misses, bolstered further with the track, pick-up weapons. The handling is again a high point, allowing more of the drifting controlled style, such as the likes of Mantis Burn Racing. Now, like that title, it does hook you early on, but requires practice to gain the finesse needed to become a pro. Now, there is a third option you would expect from the options screen, but it's not here. There is no split screen option in this game, and there is no option to play single machine multiplayer racing. You only can play the battle mode or the elimination mode, nothing else, which is an absolutely incredible omission that I still can't get my head around. So that's a sad state of affairs that isn't in the game. Hopefully it'll come with some extra DLC, but this is something I'll touch on later in the review. Now, when you do play these sections with 2 friends or more on the single machine, up to 4 players, this is where the joy, laughs and value comes in, as you scream around the track in elimination mode or battle mode, shooting, skidding and destroying your so-called mates. Now, although the price is cheap, the content does reflect that, and to a degree that overshadows the price tag far more than it should. If we take a look back at the old 1994 release second title that I have fond memories of, that shipped with over 60 tracks and a far greater collection of vehicles. Even the older titles on the PS1 and certainly the PS2 version, and even the recent release last year iOS version, in which this is pretty much taken from, including assets, track quality and visuals, it looks like an iOS port. Now, it does have 10 tracks here to choose from, but they do become tiresome quite quickly due to the short nature of them. The weapon pickups are only 3 from a Nerf gun, hammer and a Nerf bomb, and can feel haphazard to use at times. The vehicles all handle very closely, with only speed and resistance being the differential between them. Something you must guess at, as a selection screen or garage gives you no clue at all as to the strengths and weaknesses between them. Now, these can be upgraded or at least changed using a loot box system that you earn throughout each race or battle, offering new skins, voice chants and grave markings, which are weak to say the least. A trend continued with the entire package. No split screen or single machine racing is a travesty of an omission, with only battle mode or elimination being the choices open for non-internet based play. Some nice touches, such as being able to blow up other cars after you die in this mode, do little to improve the bare bones feeling the game has. Being locked out of the ranked mode until rank 10 would be fine, if not for the fact that the only other option you have is a single race that you can only start, finish and quit from to load and search again. And as games can take an average of 60 plus seconds, this is not a great feature at all. Single player is equally lacking, as you only have the option to have a single race with no league, championship or any progression at all. With the minimal online options and timed events that can happen, the worry here is if the online is pulled in the next year or so, you are left with little more than a 10-track demo for your money. Not a promising thought indeed. Now, the team behind the title do seem to have struggled with the Unity engine here, but some of this may stem from the fact that it's ported from the original iOS. I don't know the ins and outs of how this game has been ported, but it does look very similar, so I'm pretty sure assets have been used. Now, this is not that uncommon for teams to struggle with Unity. We've seen this in many other titles on consoles, and they suffer performance issues with this, and this one is no exception. The engine does have many quirks and problems with versions, and the console versions do suffer more than the PC version due to them being behind. Now, all the same issues occur, from memory allocation, destroying, parallel working threads, even mixing C# and C++ code between your game and engine logic. It can all add more overhead, which will result in performance issues and stutters, which many titles can exhibit. The biggest cost here is the frame rate, even on the PS4 Pro, where we see the same 30 FPS cap as the base PS4 and Xbox One, along with an identical 1080p image and poor to near missing any post-AA at all, giving the game a very alias look across all maps, cars and sawtooth edges are everywhere, which is a better AA method such as SMAA would have helped, but I guess they are using a deferred renderer here due to the lack of MSAA, which would have also helped solve a lot of these issues. But it also comes from the assets in the game, with texture shimmering, with subpixel noise and clashing frequency issues, such as the grills on the cars or the fire truck. The depth of field filter can also add in more noise to the image, although very nice, being a Gaussian blur with sprite sample bokeh shapes that do look nice, specifically when races start and the camera spins and pulls back. The resolution and abundant use of depth can again highlight the relatively low IQ, with it looking sub 1080 at times, even though it is not. Car models and track details are decent, with a fair use of specular maps, with surface noise maps giving tabletops, pool tables or greenhouses a nice shine across the surface. But these are overshadowed by weaker points in the title. Alpha effects are badly blended, with clear geometry clipping seen as they emanate across the floors or even blend into each other. Water caustics run at 15 FPS and stand out even mid-race for me. Trackside interaction is mixed, with certain objects colliding and sliding with you, such as balls or Cheerios, but the areas that reduce grip, such as honey spills or sauce, are static, with a simple decal drawn behind your car as your grip is reduced. Nice track sections such as the toaster pop-up or pool table pockets, but these again can be timed badly in online races, leaving you coming out way behind another or at the same time, even though you entered sequentially with bigger gaps. But all of these sections all appeared in older titles such as the PS1, the PS2 and even the old iOS game I've even mentioned. And it also has another issue, joining the likes of Prey recently that stated Pro support on the box. This is yet another title that says exactly the same thing on the tin, but runs, looks and is identical to the base model, and that includes the visual presentation we've just covered, along with the 30Hz rate. Now, in and of itself, this is far from ideal, but not the end of the world. But if you have a game like this with a 30 FPS rate, it needs to be consistent and locked, and that is not the case at all. Far from bad, but it can dip in races or battles occasionally, and even when you earn a trophy. These are clearly CPU bound issues, and I would hazard a guess this is using little more than around 3 to 4 threads at all, not helping the issue of a game that many would expect to be running at twice that rate on all machines. PC does indeed offer that level if you are interested. But the PS4 Pro or the PS4 both suffer and dip occasionally. Some may be online issues and lag, and some are just in the game abundant anyway. And I'm pretty sure the Xbox One will perform nearly identical to what you're seeing here on the Pro and the PS4. And that is a great shame that more effort or budget was not put into this title, as it could have been great. But instead, as the publisher of the game and not the developer, it appears that some base level Q&A would have helped keep the brand image high, and as it stands, it is a weaker game in almost all areas, bar visuals-ish, than titles that released over 20 years ago, and I fail to see why this was made in the first place, other than to cash in on the current retro wave that is happening. Even the iOS version doesn't sit that far behind this, albeit at a lower resolution. Now, as a huge fan of the series, I wanted to really like and enjoy this game, but the good points such as the handling and track design are let down by mediocre performance, poor image quality, bare bones content, and any feeling of progression or success. I think in 1 to 2 months the chance of finding others online to play against will be much harder indeed, and with almost no local multiplayer options to dig into and a limited to 4-car AI single player racing, which is an incredible faux pas. I can only assume comes down to the ability to utilise the threads better in the CPU, as it makes them feel very desolate compared to the online 12-man races. Even at its current price, I cannot recommend this game. Even at half its current price, I couldn't recommend this game. If they add more content to it with a fleshed out single player, better local multiplayer and a wider options online, that may change. But for now, I can only recommend picking up one of the older Micro Machine games and enjoying what is still a tough but fun title rather than spending your money on this, unless of course they extend the content. As always, I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. If you did, then please think about subscribing and liking below. If you have any comments, please leave them below. And if you like what I do and the content that I put together on both my website and my YouTube channel here, then possibly, if you can, think about supporting me on Patreon, where I'm looking into additional benefits for Patreon subscribers and pushing my content even further and wider than it currently is. And I'll catch you on the next one.
You came second.